So as some of you guys may have noticed, I have shifted towards more political content on the YouTube channel, but I was thinking about it recently and I realize now that that sort of could have been a pretty jarring experience for somebody who is a longtime viewer of the stream. I sometimes have this flawed way of looking at all of my online presence as being one unified thing. So anybody who knows who I am, I just assume in my head that they would follow me on Twitter, that they would follow me on YouTube, that they would follow me on Twitch. And that's just simply not the case. And I realized that a lot of the people that follow the YouTube channel have not been super privy to what I've been doing for the last 3 years, which is just slowly transitioning into covering politics. And it started basically on Twitter. I started to do it more and more on Twitch. And then basically in the last 2 years, I've seen a pretty decent amount of success live streaming this sort of content. It's at the point now where political content on Twitch for me gets probably like twice the views than if I play Call of Duty, which isn't to say that I don't enjoy playing video games, because I still do, and I'm not gonna stop playing video games. But I just sort of wanted to give you guys that disclaimer as to why you guys are seeing this sort of content. The simple truth is that even though I enjoy video games to this day, a little bit older, a little bit rustier, but I still really have a lot of fun playing Warzone and playing Cold War with my pals. But I don't get nearly as excited or energized or passionate about games as I do with politics. And so I decided in 2021 that I was going to shift even more of my focus in that direction. So that's why you guys are seeing the political content on this channel. If you guys enjoy the political content, consider giving me a follow on Twitter. I talk about politics a lot. Consider following the Twitch channel. I talk about politics every day on live streams, and it's been going great. If politics isn't really your thing, I get that, and my girlfriend is currently trying to convince me to start a brand new channel just for politics and then have this be the primary gaming channel and just leave that at gaming. And I think I'm probably gonna end up doing that, but that requires a little bit of planning. So in the short term, you guys are gonna see these kinds of videos on this channel. Where that is going to land in the future is sort of an open question that I'm still figuring out. But if you guys enjoy these videos, consider hitting the like button on this video. If you guys enjoy this content, consider hitting the subscribe button. If you really enjoy it, consider hitting the bell notification icon at the top of the screen. For today's video, there was a controversial decision by the Biden administration to reopen a temporary influx center in Carrizo Springs, Texas. It was a center that had previously been opened by the Trump administration. These centers exist to temporarily house unaccompanied minors that show up at our border while they're being processed into the system. He had some thoughts about that. I had some conflicting thoughts about that. I would call this more of a conversation than a debate, although there were some areas of contention, and I thought it was an interesting conversation. Figured you guys would want to see it, so it's uploaded now.
All right, Mike, are you there?
Yep.
Okay, so yeah, do you want to share your thoughts a little bit here? And I don't know how long you've been watching.
I think there is a lot of complexity whenever you get into a discussion like about immigration policy. You know, people get caught up they get tripped up with lack of knowledge about the process. You know, contextualizing this specific situation, it is why it's so problematic is this facility is a Trump facility. It was created by the Trump administration for the residential detention of children. Now, traditionally, we didn't do this. When children came to the United States, they were given to typically they would have relatives, or they would have some other person like the adult they traveled with.
Right.
That would be the person that would have their possession of the child.
Right.
And so that they would be released pending their asylum case. And upwards of, I think it was 91% of people showed up for their asylum hearing. So there was very low rates of people jumping it.
Yeah, it was the overwhelming majority showed up for their cases, even though that was a Republican talking point.
Yeah, so we don't. And first of all, this is legal immigration. Contextually, like if you want to step back a couple decades, up until the 50s, all it took to become a United States citizen was to reside physically in the United States for 2 years and be white.
Okay.
If you reside in the United States and you were white for 2 years, you became a citizen, and that was the first immigration naturalization law that was passed in the 1780s. So, and that was the law all the way up to the 50s. And, we had the Chinese Exclusion Acts and other things earlier to kind of try to prevent non-white immigration from coming to the country. Then we had, quotas, people from Southern Europe, they were not considered to be, preferred. So there was quotas on that. And we had this kind of racialized immigration system that has developed since then. And the current system is a continuation of that.
I was talking to the stream before you got in here. I don't know if you were in here for that spot, but I think they really ramped up tightening our southern border during the 70s. It was like shortly after.
Well,
it was shortly
man,
after
so there was an immigration policy from President Eisenhower. Are you familiar with this?
Vaguely. It's been a while. I remember listening to a This American Life episode on it or something.
Yes. It was called Operation Racial Slur for Mexican people. And they forcibly deported, I want to say it was well over 1 million people. I don't want to get us, I don't want to get either one of us in trouble, but that's just the name of the fucking operation. I don't know what to say.
Yeah. Well, I think slur is fine.
Yeah. And if you look it up, it was implemented in June 1954, and it was a target, as you rightly point out, targeting Mexicans who had set down roots in the United States, who had, many of them were laborers, agricultural laborers and other laborers who transferred back and forth through the border.
Seasonal work was really common. People would come up for a few months and then they would go back with their families.
And during World War II, we had something that was known as the Bracero program, which was a migrant program during World War II to allow Mexican laborers to work in the United States, with short-term contracts. Obviously World War II, labor shortage, the United States, drew on Mexican labor to help fill those gaps. And so there was a long, the Mexican-American border had always been porous, going back to when we stole half their country in the Mexican-American War, or when, the Texas Rebellion, where slavers came into a territory that was a free state. White settlers brought their slaves and then, revolted against their government for Texas independence. We had a long history of illegal white immigration into Mexico. And then later we had a long tradition of, Mexican workers coming across the border to work in the United States.
So bring it back to today then.
We supported a coup in the Honduran government.
Right.
And that resulted in a far-right government that was a narco trafficking, basically corrupted with narco traffickers to take over the government, and it completely destroyed the stability of Honduras. So MS-13, narco trafficking gangs exploded, and that resulted in a large number of refugees and people saying, hey, I don't want to be out on the street and get extorted, raped, attacked, murdered, have my young child being forced to join a violent gang, right? So they decided, we should probably try to, make it to somewhere safe. And America is, a lot of poor people around the world think of America as a country you can go to and, develop. So that resulted in a large number of children who were just sent here with no accompaniment. And that was a difficult problem of what do you do with a child that just shows up in a country?
There's no good answers. There's only least bad answers, in my mind at least.
This one was developed during Trump.
It was converted.
Trump's administration, right?
It was converted from. It used to be what do they call it? A man camp for oil workers, for federal contractors that were working near a project and they would temporarily live there. So they certainly didn't set it up.
Gotcha.
They didn't set up these facilities to be chain link fences and cold.
Yeah, but that's concerning because it's locating the children far away from population centers, right? So it's kind of difficult for people to get there and monitor it because it's in the middle of nowhere.
That is something that I completely agree with in terms, and I was telling in the chat that we should be engaging in more oversight in these facilities for sure. To have people that are physically going to these facilities to monitor the activities, to check in on the kids, to make sure that there's no heinous shit going on, because we've all heard those nightmare stories. But I think typically that more happens in ICE detention centers than it does in HHS centers. But my problem with equating what Biden did with what Trump did is that it completely ignores the fact that this facility is being opened up to accommodate thousands of kids that are being allowed into our system, as opposed to just turning them away at the border like Trump was doing. And they're attempting to allow more space so that the kids aren't in close proximity with each other, and therefore you don't have these like super spreader events at these facilities. So the fact that it's even being opened up in the first place, like, yes, it is removed from society, and yes, this was a facility that was repurposed during the Trump era for like 1 month in 2019. But we have to look at the conditions in the facility itself. And this is in no way comparable to those images that we saw go viral a few years ago.
Well, okay. I mean, a lot of those images happened in 2014, which is something that all of us have been pointing out.
Yeah.
So one of the big mistakes, and this is why a lot of people on the left are so strongly pushing back so quickly, is one of the mistakes that Obama made during his administration is he was like, well, if I'm tough on immigration, then I'll get credibility with the Republicans and they will work with me on an immigration bill that will solve these problems because, hey, you can't say that Obama's tough on immigration. Look how many people he deported. He deported more people than George W. Bush. No, he's crazy.
But wait, hold on. They changed the way that they classified deportations during the Obama administration. So before, under presidents like Clinton and H.W. Bush and George W. Bush, if you were turned away at the border, they didn't classify that as a deportation.
I think that there is a element of truth to that, but they also did in fact step up. It did in fact step up other forms of deportation as well. There was an increase. There was a surge in deportations under Obama.
I'm sure that there were times during Obama's administration where you saw surges in deportations, but the fact is that he did specifically target people that had violent offenses. And if you take away the deportations that happened at our border, turning people away, he actually deported less people than his predecessors. And I would highly encourage you to fact check me on that one, because I just went over this a week ago with my stream, pulled up the article and everything.
Yeah. Okay, so there's a lot of moving parts to this argument. The first is like, hey, he changed the definition of deportation, so it wasn't actually the same You're not comparing like to like, I guess is what you're trying to say,
it's
right?
Not, like the deporter in chief, I'm saying, is a moniker that is not deserved. It's born out of a misunderstanding of the process, is what I'm saying. I'm not defending every part of Obama's immigration failures, because clearly many of those facilities and the infrastructure that we had set up in place was not built to withstand the sort of surges that we saw at our border, and they didn't act quickly enough. And that is on Obama. And if something like that happens on Biden's watch, that will be on him as well. And I understand people's apprehension with organizations like HHS or ICE or DHS, given their track record, especially in the last 5 years. So it's not that I'm over here failing to understand why people have concerns, but what I'm concerned with is the sort of hyperbolic nature of how this is being categorized. I don't think it's I don't think it's helping people understand what the actual problem is.
I'm glad you did research, because this is a good conversation. But I'm going to disagree with you on some of this stuff. So under Bush, there's different types of immigration removals take place, right? There's deportations, there's returns, there's removals. So these are different categories of activity. You could say that, so if under Obama, they did a lot more removals than they did under the Bush administration.
Can you explain the difference between a removal and a return and a deportation? I don't know the difference there.
Let me find I found something for you. Removal is the compulsory movement of a non-citizen out of the United States based on a formal order of removal. And a return is the movement of a non-citizen out of the United States based on a permission to withdraw their application for admission at the border, an order of voluntary departure. So In other words, Obama did more removals, which is basically compulsory, and Bush and Clinton did a lot more removals or returns, excuse me. So there was a lot more people were allowed to leave without being ordered to than under Obama, who got them formally ordered to leave.
Okay.
So the total number of people who left under Bush from both of those combined is greater, but the force of the removal, the legal jeopardy that was attached to the removal was higher under Obama. So
Okay.
Obama was harsher to the people that left than Bush was, even though there was more people, as you rightly pointed out, that left under Bush.
Okay.
After interacting with the government.
Okay.
And so that's why people were so bitter, because when you get a formal removal order, you're pretty much never going to be allowed to come back into the United States.
Okay.
That's like really bad for you.
Yeah.
So that's where the deporter in chief stuff comes from. And then I'm glad you did the research, because you're right. Like, obviously, more people, actually significantly more people left under Bush than under Obama. However, significantly more people were treated harshly by Obama. That's why there's a distinction, and I think it's important that everybody understand why there's so much bitterness with Obama from immigration rights activists, because they see that. And so when
those are necessary forces. These activists and advocates and lawyers, we need them on the ground pushing these administrations left and holding them accountable. So I don't have a problem. It's totally expected that these advocates would come out in opposition to reopening a facility like that. I get that. And I don't begrudge them for that whatsoever. I guess my question is, what is the leftist solution to this immigration crisis right now? But specifically on the topic of unaccompanied minors.
Okay. What should we do with unaccompanied minors?
How do you process? Because I was talking to Chad about it before. I don't think it's humane to send them back. I'm glad that Biden has reversed that policy from Trump, and he's allowing unaccompanied minors to be processed into the system. You can't just drop them off at a bus stop down the street. They don't have any money. They don't know anybody. They don't know the language, and you can't turn them over to the first adult that shows up to claim them, because you don't know who that adult is. You have to run a background check, otherwise you don't know if you're giving them to a child trafficker or something like that. So if these three things are true, then the existence of holding centers, whatever you want to call them, the verbiage is not that important to me, but the existence of some area where they can temporarily reside while we process them into this system, that must necessarily exist. And that, I don't think, is a popular thought with a lot of leftists on Twitter.
I do not believe that using a Trump area facility in the middle of nowhere is a good policy, away from the eyes of immigration advocates, of the community, of journalists. That seems to be a bad policy. If I were to do it, if I were to design it from the ground up, I would incorporate these unaccompanied minors into a robust foster system. They would immediately just we would have a certain percentage of people that would be moved around the country. You know, a child would come to the United States and we would start to integrate them into our society if they were unaccompanied. We'd look to locate their parents if possible, and
or
try
family.
to link them again, or extended family, and have them move in with them if they're in the United States. If they're abroad, we would try to reunite the family and bring the parents over here, because I think it makes absolutely no sense for a child to be separated from their parent. If their parent is able-bodied and not an abuser, we should be looking for them and finding them and reuniting them with their child, giving them asylum opportunities as well. And then for the children that are truly orphaned, truly alone, then we use a foster system. And it will take time. And everybody who's reasonable understands that it will take time. I think what people are pushing back against is these detention facilities that were built in the Trump administration, and people are rightly very suspicious. They're pushing back immediately. I don't think that this is the long-term plan for Joe Biden, and I hope the pushback makes them realize that it would be a bad long-term plan, and they come up with something new. In my local area, we had, I remember this very well because I was running for office in 2014.
What kind of office?
In Pennsylvania, for the legislature. State legislature.
State rep then?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
And there was a group of unaccompanied minors that had come to the United States, and we had these facilities that were nonprofits for children in difficult circumstances. And they were being basically bused to a specialist facility where we had psychiatrists, but it was in my local community. It was right there. And unfortunately, Tea Party, proto-Trumpian people tried to physically block traffic in the road to prevent these children from coming up into this facility.
Fucking assholes.
And of course, don't even get me started on what I think of Trump supporters and Tea Party people. But what I'm trying to highlight here was they were being brought to a facility that was specialized in treating children that had gone through trauma, not a facility that was, basically what amounts to a juvenile detention facility. And you're right.
With like
there has to be some period of time. We have to be reasonable here. You can't just put these children willy-nilly anywhere. And you need to try to get the documents and do all those other things. But the optics and frankly, the process here is broken and we shouldn't accept it. Even though I understand, even if I believe you that Joe Biden's heart's in the right place, this is just not a good way of doing it.
I don't claim to speak on like the nature of Joe Biden's heart. I have no idea what his actual intentions are. I'm just talking about like the actual policy and what it actually means. So if we're having a discussion about oversight, I'm completely with you on that, and reevaluating how strict our borders are. I think we should do that. That's obviously not going to happen in the next 4 to 8 years, but yes, that would be the right path to go down. But if people want to put pressure on the Biden administration, I'm totally fine with that. What I guess I'm not fine with is this whole like equating what's happening in this facility with what was happening in ICE detention facilities under Obama and Trump.
Okay. I just don't think that anybody who's criticizing this is doing so. I don't think they're lying. I don't think they're doing it in bad faith. I think they are just frustrated that we have this long-term issue that hasn't come, and Biden doesn't have a good resolution for it. And yeah, it's going to take time.
Well, I like a pathway to citizenship. I like that bill. And I
think it's way too long. I think it should not be 8 years. That's an absurdity. Maybe more like 4 or something. Why 8 years? That's obscene.
Well, I mean, I truthfully am not prepared to get into the complexity of that sort of.
Yeah, well, fair enough.
But I do like the fact that for the first time, I think ever, right? There is a pathway to citizenship being proposed.
Well, Reagan amnestied people, so
he did, yeah. But was that from an executive order or was that through a bill? I don't remember how that worked, but. In either case, and I also like the fact that Biden has given new guidance to ICE to sharply limit who they remove from the country. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing.
How do you feel about abolishing ICE?
I'm open to that.
Seeing how it was created, we both are much older than ICE itself, and the culture of it being so like mixed up with
that came about in the aftermath
of toxic stuff.
September 11th, right?
Yes. Yeah. So they reorganized a lot of stuff into the Department of Homeland Security, which, seems to me to be a gigantic waste of money and doesn't do anything. But so they moved, like, for example, like the Coast Guard and the Secret Service, were in the Treasury Department, and they created TSA, the Transportation Safety Administration or Authority, whatever. I don't know. And they kind of like nationalized all the airport security. And then they created ICE and got rid of, it was the INS, Immigration and Naturalization Service. Then they created ICE. And
sounds much more sinister. Immigration customs
it is much more sinister. It is much more sinister.
Yeah, I think that's why I'm more open to abolishing ICE altogether. It's just because it seems like the culture in that particular institution is just rotten to the core. And I completely understand the lack of trust. And I wasn't saying that people that are quote retweeting the Washington Post article are doing so in bad faith or lying. Although some of them I think know better than to phrase it the way that they're phrasing it. But I think for the most part, Americans, and especially young Americans that are like on Twitter, largely don't really understand what's actually happening at the border. They don't understand the problem, and they don't understand the processes to absorb someone into our system, especially like an unaccompanied minor. And so like the DSA, for example, quote retweeting that article saying abolish ICE, that just seems kind of silly to me because this is not an ICE facility, and abolishing ICE wouldn't change what's happening here. And it also implies, I think it also kind of implies an equivalence between Biden's policy and Trump's policy, which is just simply not.
Well, there is some level of continuity, which we already established. And
yes.
and you know, for me, I have a problem with that continuity because it feels like we are still doing a lot of oppressive and negative things that don't have a benefit other than hating immigrants, right? Like, it's suspicious of you so skillfully said earlier that immigrants are less likely to be criminal, more likely to have a job, more likely to complete a degree and get educated. Why the hell would we want to target that group for extra enforcement? That seems crazy to me.
So then the question becomes, how do you lay the groundwork to change hearts and minds in this country? Because we do have a largely anti-immigrant sentiment, or it's large enough to disrupt a lot of progress. So how do you get through to like 10-20% of the country that are afraid of immigrants? Because all you need, I guess
it depends on why you think they are afraid of them.
Well, I think it's pretty clear that a lot of it has to do with just sort of general xenophobia or open bigotry.
Yeah,
but it's somewhere on that spectrum of just being sort of wary and apprehensive of outside culture on the one end, to the other end just like hating brown and black people. I wanted to watch this video with my chat though, so I'm going to do that. Thanks for coming on, and I'll talk to you later. It was good having this talk with you.
Good conversation. Hope to see you soon.
Take it easy.
Bye, bud.
All right. Well, I enjoyed that conversation. That was good.